Welcome to this safety training module entitled Prevent Hand Injuries. Stop, Look, and Think. We'll be discussing topics that are critical to anyone who relies on his or her hands during the workday. We'll introduce a unique way to ensure that we are doing everything we can to keep our hands safe. No one needs to tell you that your hands are very precious and you should do everything in your power to protect them. They are some of your body's most complex mechanisms, not to mention they have so many uses. Did you know that each of your hands consists of 27 individual bones, all held in place by a network of ligaments, muscles, tendons, and nerves? That's not including all of the blood vessels and skin that completes the package. Though nails have been provided to offer some protection for your fingertips, it's pretty obvious that these complex mechanisms are pretty exposed to damage. Imagine what it would be like to lose the use of your hands even for a short time. You use them daily to do things like write, feel the world around you, to communicate with others, to hold things, and to work. In other words, your hands are essential to accomplishing so many of the tasks you do every hour and minute of every day. Don't take them for granted, and don't just assume that they will be okay. Looking at the big picture, your circumstances can change in an instant. In fact, hand injuries generally do tend to happen in an instant, and of course they hurt along the way, long after the incident occurs. Statistics tell us that 1/3 of all reported accidents in the workplace involve someone's hands. Why is that? We tend to use our hands in just about every action that we perform. They're always out there reaching and grabbing, moving and manipulating, being on the front line, so to speak, in everything we do. It's no wonder that where our hands are concerned, if we don't purposely take action to prevent, things can change in an instant with our hands. There are so many types of hand injuries, and many do some level of permanent damage. Of course, amputations lead the list of catastrophic injury. Losing a digit or the portion of the hand can alter your life forever. It's permanent and has the possibility of being fatal due to infection and blood loss. The long-term effect of lacerations or cuts depends on whether nerves, muscles, and tendons are involved. And don't think that lacerations don't have the possibility of being fatal. Infection can set in quickly. A broken bone in the hand can take a long time to heal and often causes limitations in movement and mobility. The long-term effect of punctures, like lacerations, often depends on what is affected. But keep in mind that your hands contain pieces that are close together. The odds that some vital components will be damaged is great. Burn damages are both catastrophic and long-lasting. Heat, chemical, and electrical burns destroy both flesh, bones, and nerve tissues. Particular care has to be taken in treatment to prevent infection that could result in a fatality. Contusions or crushes with the resulting swelling and internal bleeding are painful and tender. Don't overlook those sprains and strains that can hamper the use of our hands. Carpal tunnel syndrome can be a painful issue that often requires medical intervention. Now that we've seen many of the types of injuries that we can sustain in our hands, let's consider how many of them happen. Aside from the actual contact of surfaces or materials involved, there is often some combination of characteristics or behaviors involved in hand accidents. Carelessness can be a leading culprit. With your hands out on the front lines, all it takes is a momentary lapse of control and your hands will pay the price. The remedy? Make every attempt to stay focused, particularly when holding tools or working near dangerous surfaces. A close cousin to carelessness is a lack of awareness. Not taking time to know the dangers can cost you. Sharp tools and pinch points are very unforgiving. You, like everyone else, is susceptible to boredom in your job, particularly doing repetitive tasks that you might think you can do in your sleep. That's often when those tasks are the most dangerous. Don't wake up with that boredom fog and your hands are in a bind. Shortcuts can kill, or at the very least do irreparable damage to your hands. Just remember, if there's a rule against it, there's probably a good reason. Don't be tempted when the thought comes to bypass that guard or just reach quickly into that spot. "I just got distracted" is one of the most frequent comments made by workers after they get hurt. Remember, stay focused and ignore distractions. We've looked at the types of injuries our hands are subject to receiving, as well as some typical causes. The real question is, how do we prevent them? We propose that there is a simple 3-step process that can help prevent many of the injuries that threaten the well-being of your hands. Instead of jumping straight into that job that you've just been assigned, take a couple of minutes to stop and look and think before you act. This simple process just might make the difference between coming away with a job completed and coming away with a hand injury. Let's take a closer look. First, stop. Don't just jump right in. Second, look. Look the situation over. Third, think. What are the hazards involved and how do you avoid them? And of course, do these 3 steps before you act. Again, following these 3 steps can make the difference. The first step is to stop before you start the job. Failing to stop can get you in trouble. Take time to assess the job. A couple of minutes could save you a world of hurt and won't hurt in the long run with the job. The next step is to look. What do you look for? Here are several of the typical hazards to consider. Unguarded pinch points. A pinch point exists where 2 surfaces contract skin, clothing, or materials, and of course your hands are the most susceptible to pinch points. In this example, the chain wrapped around the assembly is a likely candidate. Imagine your fingers wrapped around that chain to hold it steady. Then the boom lifts and suddenly the chain shifts, pinching your fingers or palms. Ouch. Or maybe this collection of moving pieces might be a more likely spot. Imagine reaching down to move or to shift a similar mechanism only to receive a pinch as something bends or gives. So take time to identify and avoid any unguarded pinch points. Trip and slip hazards can get you when you aren't looking. Simple obstacles such as a coiled hose or a leaning shroud can either cause you to fall or fall towards you. Sudden lunges to catch a falling object can have a drastic result on your hands. Considering falling objects, watch out for those heavy objects just lying around waiting to slip and fall. Catching one of these with those sharp edges would be catching an accident indeed. Look around your work site for objects that might get you when you're not looking. Be sure to consider what sharp edges you might encounter during the job. For example, cutting tools such as this hone could very well have sharp or abrasive edges. As might this T-track. Generally, most softer components, when banged in the course of their lives, end up with sharp edges. With floor space at a premium these days in our facilities, cells are getting tighter and tighter. Be careful when working within these tight spaces. Consider carefully what you need to lift and move before you start. Chemicals need to be one of your considerations as you assess the situation. This particular cell happens to use a water-based synthetic lubricant. That is fairly benign to work around, but you certainly don't want to ingest it. But if you're working around a corrosive such as this particular material, it might be a different story. Just remember, you certainly have the right to know when it comes to chemical safety. You'll want to consider the energy hazards present at the job site. Two common functions associated with many of our cells or robots. Make sure they're disengaged and de-energized. And electrical connections and controls. Take a look around and make sure that you are safe. A good place to start would be to look at the lockout tagout placard. This document will show the points at which to shut off and de-energize the various functions of the machinery. Remember that these could include electric, air, hydraulic, and mechanical devices. Think mousetrap. Obviously, you wouldn't want to do repair work on a set mouse strap. One wrong move and you would have a nasty result. Likewise, make sure that all relevant energy sources are disconnected and de-energized before you start work. A final area for you to consider as you look for hazards are lifting issues. Identify them beforehand. We all know the temptation to manhandle things and to place yourself when something comes up. Having gone through these considerations may seem like a long process, but it doesn't have to be. Experience will tell you a lot, and pausing to look allows your experience to keep you safe. A good way to prompt yourself through this short safety analysis would be to ask yourself some questions while you survey the job. Here you'll see some examples. A great place to start is by asking, is there a job safety analysis I can look at? The JSA is formatted to tell you the important steps it takes to operate or work on the equipment. Key points and associated hazards are listed for the important steps, along with reasons and the key steps and key points, as well as controls to address the hazards. Having started there, consider which of the hazards listed on the JSA or that you see will you come in contact with while working. Another question would be, what PPE do you need to use in addition to the normal hearing and eye protection? Stopping to ask that question before you start is a wise choice. An often neglected question you should ask relates to your tools. Are the tools I have right for the job? And are they in good shape? Those things should come to mind every time you approach another assignment. Worn or flared surfaces on such items as pieces of brass and Allen wrenches have caused many a bruised knuckle or sore eye over the years. Stop, look, and think about whether you really want to work with what you have. Don't forget to check the edges of such tools as boxes and adjustable wrenches. Are the jaws tight and in good shape? Slips can be dangerous in tight quarters. A great final question would be, will I need any help at some point in this job? Figuring that out front is far better than when you have both hands tied up lifting a heavy component nearly off and it hangs up, and realize that you need that brass hammer that's lying just out of reach. Looking at the stop, look, think before you act process is really the simple act of stopping to use your good common sense before you get started. It only takes a few minutes. You've heard the saying, look before you leap. Where your hands are concerned, you can't afford to jump blindly in. Remember, stop, look, think before you act. During the course of this brief training, we have discussed how precious and vital your hands are to you. We've looked at the various types of injuries that you hope will never happen to you, and we've introduced a simple process to avoid hand injuries. Remember, stop, look, and think before you act. Material for this presentation have been taken from these sources. They can be found at the websites listed. At the conclusion of this lesson, please proceed to the next lesson to take a short quiz to determine your understanding of the principles discussed. Thanks for participating in this hands-on safety training.